Begin. J'ouvre maintenant.
I call this meeting to order.
Sorry, I'm hearing the interpretation.
It's because you're speaking in French, Dr. Fry.
Oh, I'm sorry. Okay. Okay.
If you want to be on floor, then you.
Is that fine? Is that fine now?
If you want to speak in French and put yourself on floor, that way you won't hear the interpretation.
Okay, all right. I see what you're saying. Yeah, right. Okay, thanks. Okay. J'ouvre maintenant.
I call this meeting to order.
Je voudrais reconnaître.
I would like to acknowledge that this meeting is taking place on the unceded traditional territory of the Algonquin Anishinaabe people.
Bienvenue à la réunion.
Welcome to meeting number 17 of the House of Commons Standing Committee on Canadian Heritage.
And now, is people have all come into the room in the interim, Chair?
We are still missing 3 members, Madam Chair.
All right. Pursuant to the motion adopted by the committee on Monday, January the 31st, the committee is meeting on the study of emblems of hate. And of course, today's meeting is taking place in a hybrid format. Some of you are virtual and some are in place. For those people who are in the room, I would like to remind you of the Board of Internal Economy's request starting on March the 10th, 2022, that all those attending the meeting in person must wear a mask except for members who are at their place during proceedings. And even then, I think it's important to wear a mask. So I want to give a few comments for the benefits of the witnesses and members. Please wait until I recognize you by name before you speak. If we are having trouble with interpretation or any such thing, let us know right away so we can fix it and get on with the meeting. And of course, you're not allowed to take pictures of this meeting at all. And so for those on Zoom, you have a choice at the bottom of your own device to decide to move from English to French. There's an interpretation icon there, and all comments. Just remember that all comments should be made through the chair. So for members in the room, you know the drill. If you wish to speak, raise your hand. For members on Zoom, please use the raised hand function on your screen, and the clerk and I will try and manage your hands up and give you in priority order as you put your hand up. In accordance with our routine motion, I'm informing the committee that all witnesses have completed the required connection tests in advance of the meeting, and I now would like to welcome our witnesses. Beginning with, the witnesses are the Canadian Anti-Hate Network with Mr. Bernie Farber, who is chair, the Center for Israel and Jewish Affairs with Richard Marceau, who is chair, the Center for the Prevention of Radicalization Leading to Violence with Rosalind Mavungu, who is the executive director, and we also have the Friends of Simon Wiesenthal Center, Michael Levitt, who is president and chief executive officer, and he has a colleague with him. The Hindu Federation, Mr. Rupnath Sharma, president, Sarah and Chaim Neuberger, Holocaust Education Center, and Daniel Paneton is the manager, and he's there. Urban Res Solutions, social enterprise with Roderick Burton and Fairleigh Fex. Now, each witness has 5 minutes to speak, and I will give you a 30-minute warning so that you can wrap up. If you don't get to finish everything that you have to say, don't forget there will be a question and answer session in which you can add the pieces that you didn't get to finish. So we're going to begin, and I'm going to start with Mr. Farber. For 5 minutes, please.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair, and thank you all members of the committee for inviting me to participate. I will try not to take up too much of your time other than just to preface my remarks by saying that I speak to you in 2 capacities, one as the chair of the Canadian Anti-Hate Network, but in a much more personal capacity as a child of a Holocaust survivor. My father was the sole survivor of his Polish town, the sole Jewish survivor out of 750 Jews. That means that his wife, his two children, 7 brothers and sisters, all the Jews of Bochka, Poland, were murdered as a result of genocide, a Nazi genocide. And the swastika, the crooked cross, the crooked iron cross, is what we came to view as one of the most evil symbols in modern history. And so we address today the need to understand the importance of these symbols. And I do so as a child of the kingdom of death. I had no paternal family whatsoever. And that one particular symbol is a symbol that drove evil, drove murder, and drove genocide. And so choosing to legislate against such symbols, whether it is the Nazi swastika, whether it is KKK emblems such as the blood drop or the Confederate flag, these are unmistakable symbols of hate that show support for genocide and slavery, or they grossly minimize their violence. Canada already has laws promoting genocide, Section 318, and promoting, or not promoting, but certainly disallowing and making hateful comments illegal, the willful promotion of hatred under Section 319. And in our opinion, these symbols already contravene these laws because of what they represent and communicate, but law enforcement need this spelled out for them. So let's spell it out for them. Any legislation that we decide or that you decide here needs to be very explicit and tight around the following issues. Only symbols which target identifiable groups should be eligible to be banned in order to prevent the legislation from being weaponized against people and groups who advocate for an inclusive, equitable democracy in society. Identifiable groups have been spelled out in the criminal code. They're identifiable groups by race, creed, color, nationality, or sexual orientation. There must be exceptions for good faith educational use, as well as opposition to the banned symbols. So, for example, you don't want to ban books like Mouse, which is an excellent promotion in terms of understanding the Holocaust. Crossed out swastikas, where we're saying no swastikas. We have to be careful about that as well. So this will be a very carefully thought out law. And in the end, I want us to consider the victims. Consider those who have survived great genocides, great mass murders, slavery. Consider how they feel when they see the symbols that in fact targeted them in the first place. This is our time. Hatred has really engulfed much of the world. We've seen it here in Canada. We've gone from hateful words to hateful symbols to actual assaults and murder. It's time for us to take a stand. It's time for legislators to take a stand. And it's time for us to tell police authorities that these symbols are symbols of hate and they have to act upon them. Thank you very much, Madam Chair, and I will be happy to answer any questions at the end of this session.
Thank you, Mr. Faber. You were 1 minute under. Excellent, excellent. That's very good. Thank you. And so now I'm going to go to our next witness, who is the Center for Israel and Jewish Affairs, Richard Marceau.
Merci, Madame.
Thank you, Madam Chair. May I take Bernie's minute?
Merci.
Oh, you have to only minute. Sorry about that.
Un gars s'essaye.
You know the rules. You used to be on these committees.
Merci, Madame.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you for inviting me. I won't be telling you anything new when I say that hate crimes, radicalization, and extremism are on the rise in Canada. We as Jews are particularly affected by this rise in hate.
Jews are particularly vulnerable to this rise in hate. Statistics Canada numbers 2020 show that while we represent Jews, 1% of Canadian population, we are the target of 62% of police-reported hate crimes targeting religious minorities. 62%. Comme l'a affirmé Erwin Cotler, l'envoyé.
As Erwin Cotler, Canada's special envoy for Holocaust remembrance and the fight against anti-Semitism, has stated, hatred of Jews is at its highest level since the end of World War II.
Are acutely aware of the threats to our safety. With hate against us rising, the sight of someone openly waving the Nazi flag, the Nazi symbol, on the steps of the Chateau Laurier during the truckers' convoy brought deep feelings of horror and fear to our community. Pour être clair,
To be clear, when I see a person wave the swastika, what I understand is that that person wants my death, my children's death, my family's death, and my community's death.
when I see someone waving a Nazi swastika, the message that I get from this person is that he or she wants me dead, wants my children dead, wants my family dead, and members of my community dead. There is nothing subtle about that. Sadly, that was not the only instance of a hate symbol displayed openly during the truckers' demonstration. And the truckers' convoy was not the only instance of hate symbols being displayed openly on Parliament Hill. So now is the time to act. Now's the time to act swiftly, and it is time to act smartly. And by smartly, I mean to say, for example, that this swastika that we're talking about, that the symbol that came to symbolize, as Bernie Farber said, hatred towards Jews, was also and is also a sacred and holy symbol for Hindus, for Buddhists, and for Jains. And toute décision d'interdire
Any decision to ban this symbol must also protect the legitimate use of the symbol for a growing number of our citizens, because for them it is sacred. And on this topic, with a witness who you'll hear from soon, an article in an English language journal.
that waving Nazi symbols is already banned under hate speech legislation, and I agree with Bernie Farber on this. There is an argument for this position. However, clarifying this would be a good thing. Nous devons agir rapidement tout en
We need to act quickly while understanding why someone would display such hateful symbols. Because simply banning these symbols would be tantamount to putting a plaster on an open wound. All levels of government, federal, provincial, and municipal, must work together to effectively fight against radicalization and hate.
ce qui est derrière ça.
And we need to understand what is behind it.
Morning thinking, well, you know what, I'm going to drive downtown Ottawa waving Confederate flag in a noose or a Nazi flag and say, you know what, that's a good thing. Like there's indoctrination behind this, and we need to understand and work on that part as well. Un autre point important.
Another important point. Hate is hate no matter where it comes from.
No matter what the source is. And here, I take a bit of exception with the wording of terms of reference for this study, because much of the focus has been on hate symbols of white supremacist groups, and rightly so, but there are other groups that are very hateful. For example, Hamas and Hezbollah, groups that are banned in Canada, that
One
are
minute, Mr. Masso.
thank you, that have been implicated in attacks on Jews, not just in Israel but around the world. Both are listed as terror organizations. And why do I bring them up? Because their flags have been seen in the streets of Montreal, in front of Queen's Park, and in front of this very Parliament. Et quand je vois ces symboles,
When I see these symbols and these flags, I have the same reaction as if I were to see a Nazi flag. The person waving that wants me dead, wants my children, my community, and my family dead. So, and I will conclude on this, Madam Chair. Yes, banning hateful symbols is one tool to add to our arsenal that needs to be strengthened. And I would like to continue this discussion during question period. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Masso. I want to move now to our next witness, who is the Center for the Prevention of Radicalization Leading to Violence, Rosalind Mavungu. Executive Director. Is Ms. Mazungo there? Yeah, there you are. I see you. Thank you. Please begin for 5 minutes.
Mesdames et messieurs les élus.
Members of Parliament, good day. First, I would like to recognize the fraternity that led in 1701 to sustained peace between France and our confederation here. And it is in this spirit of fraternity that led to the treaty, which is a a central value for our center for the prevention of radicalization leading to violence. Those who spoke before me mentioned how hate crimes have been on the rise, and we can reference Statistics Canada. Overall crime decreased, but hate crimes increased by 37%. The number of hate crimes reported by police in certain racialized communities is also on the rise, a significant rise. For example, Black, East and Southeast Asian communities, Indigenous communities, and for South Asians. These data must be considered bearing in mind nuances. The data are underestimated, and some communities have low trust in the police. Our Center for Prevention of Radicalization carried out a study last December to report on all hate crimes online, which come up the most frequently. Regarding symbols, and we saw this in Ottawa recently, Nazi symbols and the Confederate flag during the trucker protests. It was 24 hours after International Holocaust Remembrance Day, and it was on the National Day of Remembrance of the Quebec City mosque attack that Nazi flags were flown in public on Parliament Hill. Here in Montreal, again in Quebec, swastikas were drawn on an outdoor hockey rink recently, and we saw numerous other expressions and signs of hatred in the public space. Here in Quebec, in measures taken with partners, our center has been reflecting on one of the solutions that could help to address hate crimes, and we created the Little Illustrated Guide for Hatred in Quebec, which is an educational tool. It allows people to distinguish between different symbols and expressions of hate within the Quebec context. And opening this tool up to the general public is with a view to raise awareness regarding the expression of hatred. A tool such as this works in three ways. Firstly, in a targeted way, it supports communities and spaces to address hateful expressions. And it also raises awareness among people who work in the streets, teachers, police officers, etc., to help them recognize hate symbols and to appreciate their violence and danger, and to take preventive action in their respective communities. Finally, at the individual level, anyone who consults this illustrated guide can also take action against the hate phenomenon by adding a new entry. If someone consults the guide and does not find a particular hate symbol, that person can contact us to suggest an addition. So,
Mavungo.
OK. Étant donné
given the multiple meanings and the fluidity of those meanings of hate symbols, for example, there was a symbol in Norway that originally was innocuous, but took on a violent meaning afterwards. This means that symbols can evolve in their meaning from one context to another and can become hate symbols. Therefore, what's important is to raise awareness in politicians, businesses, police officers, etc., about the use of these symbols. And when these companies, politicians, teachers, and police officers notice the use of this symbol, they know that there is an issue. So given the changing and multiple meanings of hate symbols, an outright ban of using hate symbols is difficult to enforce. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms. Mavunga. And now we go to the next witness, and that is the Friends of Simon Wiesenthal Center for Holocaust Studies. And Mr. Levitt or Mr. Kersner Roberts, you have to share the 5 minutes. I just wanted you to know. Thank you.
Thank you. It's Miss Kersner Roberts, but
Oh, I'm sorry.
it's okay.
I didn't see you on video.
Hi. Yeah, I'm the policy director at Simon Wiesenthal, and it's a real pleasure for me to be speaking with you all today. Thank you so much for inviting us to participate. I'm going to be focusing my remarks largely on the symbol of the swastika today. Yes, it is only one of many dangerous hate symbols that our society contends with, but it is also one that reflects some of the worst, most evil, most dangerous ideas that human beings are capable of conjuring up. Today, here in Canada, we are too often confronting this symbol of hate. Almost every single day, we receive reports from schools that swastikas have been painted on walls, on books, in the library. We see it painted on synagogues and other Jewish spaces. We see it on signs and flags at protests and rallies. And most often, perhaps, we see it on social media. The swastika is used as a symbol to intimidate, to terrorize, and the meaning rings out loud and clear. To those in our community who survived the Holocaust, the swastika is a sharp memory of what it means to be stripped of one's humanity, to become a slave, a number, a reminder of what it is like to never get a chance to say goodbye to one's loved ones. To those from Canada's great generation who fought so courageously to defeat Hitler, the swastika is a reminder of their years of sacrifice and horror, not knowing whether they would ever come home again. And to the families of the 45,000 Canadians who lost their lives in that fight, it is a symbol of unimaginable loss. I agree with my colleagues from our community, Mr. Farber and Mr. Marceau. It is already illegal in Canada to promote hate and advocate for genocide as per sections 318 and 319 in the Criminal Code. And yet, we continue to see the swastika proudly displayed outside of neo-Nazi clubhouses. We see it used as a vile political statement to demonize political leaders, including members of parliament. Last May, during the escalation of conflict between Israel and the terror group Hamas, we saw it used at anti-Israel rallies to degrade the Jewish nation and its people. Could our hate laws be written more clearly so that law enforcement has a more explicit directive with respect to the inclusion of hate symbols in the conception of illegal hate speech? Yes, absolutely. But the solution must go deeper. Hate crimes are growing dramatically in our country from one year to the next, and the Jewish community remains one of the most likely minority groups to be victimized by it. We are, at the same time, we are seeing hate crimes continue to stand out from other kinds of crimes as the least likely to be cleared, the least likely to see law enforcement identify a perpetrator, the least likely to result in charges and convictions. This is nothing less than justice denied, not just to the direct victims of hate crimes, but to our entire society and to our values as Canadians. Clarifying our hate laws to explicitly include hate symbols could be part of the solution to growing hate crime, but the solution also requires new resources for hate units throughout our law enforcement services. It requires new opportunities for cutting-edge training for our police so they can build stronger and more convictable cases against hate criminals. This is, by the way, one area of programming that we at Friends of Simon Wiesenthal Center are building and offering to increasing numbers of police every year. But more than anything, solving the problem of rising hate crime comes down to political will. The will of our leaders, such as the legislators here today,
1 minute,
to see hate criminals held to account. I'm so grateful to all of you who have shown the will. And I look forward, and all of us at Friends of Simon Wiesenthal look forward to continuing the discussion with you.
Thank you very much, Ms. Kersner-Roberts. And now I will go to Mr. Sharma from the Hindu Federation.
Madam
For 5
Chairman,
minutes.
members of the committee, thank you for this opportunity. I confess that I've never found since in history that there is a solution that has come and presented by anyone that has been accepted totally of how to eradicate hate. I certainly know that it cannot be removed by words, nor can it be removed by bullets and bombs. It will certainly be addressed by good education, good wisdom. And if you look at the world that we live in, we need political will with wisdom. We need laws to be followed. And I think most important, we need education for our general society. I'm here today because we, the Hindus, support any laws that will bring it clear that people who go against the law of mankind and promote hate of any form must be addressed by the law of the land. And every effort that must be made to refine the law to address these issues, however they may be concealed or attempted to be concealed under different emblems. I have a more particular concern today that the term swastika has been used very, very grossly across the meeting today. I want that this country must be educated to understand that when we use that term swastika, we are talking about a Sanskrit terminology, and it was not something that belonged to Germany. The Haken cross is the term that Hitler intended for Nazism, and we would like to see that terminology be used when referring to that emblem at all times. For when you refer to it as a Nazi symbol and use swastika, you're offending the Hindu community and you're creating a form of Hindu phobia. We, the Hindus, are affected by this tremendously. So we agree with new laws, but we want you to be very cautious. We want to caution the lawmakers that when they implement laws and they come to and set laws in place, that the implementation is a key factor. And I want to use a reference with respect to all and no disrespect to anyone. When the same-sex law was made, the parliament agreed on it, and the implementation, those who perform marriage ceremonies like I do, came to the sad recognition that the marriage certificate no more says bride or groom, it says applicant and applicant. So we implemented a law to give someone benefit and took away the value that others consider very valuable, where bride and groom is considered. So my caution to this committee and the lawmakers, when you do decide on this law, be conscious. I have a statement that I like to read. Hopefully the time will permit. That as Parliament considers Mr. Julian's bill, Bill C-2229, an act to amend the criminal code banning symbols of hate, it must make sure that the context of the use of the Nazi swastika is carefully considered. We cannot allow a Hindu emblem of goodness to be erased as we take steps to together stamp out hate. The bill, which we support, should be amended to ensure that the proper use of swastika for religious purposes by Hindus, Buddhists, Jains, and Zoroastrians is protected, celebrated, and remains completely legal in Canada. It should be amended to clarify that the evidence demonstrates that Nazi Haken cross is a weapon of hate, not a matter of free expression. Whatever the political events of the day, it is absolutely possible, indeed essential, to combat Jew hatred while ensuring the rights of Hindus, Buddhists, Jains, and Zoroastrians, Canadians, and respect their benevolent and sacred symbols. Let us together take the steps to celebrate our religious freedom and our unity in confronting Nazism or any form of hate that is projected by any group or any form. Today, the statistics tell us that hate crimes are growing, while violent crimes or other crimes are diminishing. It tells us that our society is facing where the demographics have changed, and as Canada opens its door to more immigrants, we, the lawmakers, we, the politicians, we, the people, need to be conscious that the terms we use, the banners we stand under, do have an impact on the people that may be newcomers or all residents of this country, and we need to protect all equally at all times. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Sharma. And I go next to Sarah and Chaim Neuberger, Holocaust Education Center, Daniel Panettone. Mr. Panettone, for 5 minutes.
Thank you to the Honorable Chair, distinguished members of the committee, and my fellow presenters. Many were dismayed over the course of the Freedom Convoy protests in Ottawa when they saw unambiguous hate symbols like the Nazi swastika and the Confederate flag carried on Canadian streets. However, these were not the only hateful symbols observed by anti-hate experts. Contemporary hate is not always as easy to identify as the Nazi swastika or Confederate flag, and groups in Ottawa that displayed obscure, ambiguous, and contextual hate symbols were able to do so with few noticing. This is by design, as the propaganda that many contemporary hate groups and movements deploy relies on a number of strategies to dodge moderation and avoid public censure. These include irony, humor, misdirection, mischaracterization, aesthetic choices, and pseudo-scholarship. Memes, in many ways, are the political flyer of the 21st century. They're easy to produce and share, and memes and the associated culture around them have become very important communication tools. On social media, hate peddlers constantly come up with new memes, symbols, and slogans to shroud their beliefs. Part of this strategy involves the appropriation of anodyne symbols and assigning hateful meaning. Many of these symbols, like the OK hand gesture or Pepe the Frog, utilize plausible deniability to deflect charges of hate and set the accuser up for ridicule. This process was captured by a controversy that surrounded a specific meme during the convoy. In February, Member of Parliament Yara Sachs spoke on the House of Commons floor about the honk honk memes that were going around pro-convoy social media pages, describing it as a stand-in for the phrase Hail Hitler. The statement resulted in a deluge of mockery and harassment, attacking Sachs for making what was characterized as a baseless accusation aimed to tar all convoy supporters as Nazi sympathizers. The vast majority of participants in the protests were not sympathetic to Nazism or fascism, but there were known hate group leaders and members present who were trying to capitalize on the moment. In certain contexts, honk honk does mean Heil Hitler, but from the beginning, the symbol was designed to be a trap. In February 2019, users of the infamous website 4chan began posting a variation of Pepe the Frog wearing a rainbow wig, red nose, and bow tie that became known as Honkler. The meme was meant to characterize a sense of nihilism in the face of an absurd and dying society. That month, a user stated that honk honk was going to become the next OK hand gesture, and users were quick to connect the acronym Hail Hitler and openly posted about their hope that the mainstream media and the Anti-Defamation League would take their bait and describe it as a hate symbol. The memes that emerged from the Freedom Convoy developed independently from the anti-Semitic clown memes on 4chan. However, memes as a medium build upon existing imagery, and the Freedom Convoy memes were quickly contaminated by the visual vocabulary and content of the previously created, explicitly anti-Semitic examples. After the events of the convoy, many supporters and participants are even more alienated and perhaps radicalized. The concern is that participants and supporters may now be finding themselves in increasingly extreme spaces online and off, where they may be encountering hateful material like Hong Kong imagery that celebrates the Holocaust. Because of the similarity between convoy memes and the content on more extreme spaces, the individual in question may be more receptive to the hateful ideas than if they were presented with unfamiliar visuals. This is only one example that appeared in the convoy, which triggered an explosion of meme production in both extreme and mainstream spaces. Further, the convoy is only one example where such symbols appeared and developed. Memes and symbols that rely on ambiguity and plausible deniability can be found in a number of political communities and groups. I wish to make it very clear that I do not advocate for the criminalization of symbols like the honk honk meme. This would involve a massive violation of free speech and would be incredibly difficult to enforce given the ever-changing nature of online communication and plausible deniability. There are a number of organizations doing excellent work to address contemporary hate through research and education, many of which are represented here today. But when compared to the networks and resources that are available in Europe and in the United States, Canada's infrastructure is lacking. The relative sparseness of existing educational, research, and outreach infrastructure creates space for hate groups and movements to operate unnoticed.
1 minute.
Thank you. The investments that the Government of Canada have made in addressing hate today are vital for the continued development of the tools that will equip Canadians with the digital and hate literacy skills that are needed to decipher the fluid and often surreal nature of political discourse today. Thank you to the Honourable Chair and the committee for your time.
Thank you very much, Mr. Newberger. And I just wanted to go to the final witnesses, who are Urban Wares Solutions, Social Enterprise, and they're Roderick Brereton and Farley Flex, who is Executive Director. And I just need you to know that you will share the 5 minutes if you both wish to speak. So thank you very much. Begin for 5 minutes.
Okay, good afternoon, members of the committee and the chair. My name is Roderick Brereton, and this is my business partner, Farley Flex. And when we traditionally think of hate, we think of the swastikas, the Confederate flags, the N-word scrawled on lockers. And although these are definite vile symbols that represent hatred, there's also contemporary symbols that even though they're not in your face as they were in past days. They're now in different platforms, for instance, on the Zoom platform. So ironically enough, we're on this very high security-wise Zoom platform right now, but a lot of times when Black organizations are conducting Zooms, we've been bombed by white supremacists who are able to manipulate the technology and flood our Zoom chats, and also with the visuals, give grand gestures of extreme oppression and racism. So we just wanted to acknowledge that the hatred and the symbols have evolved just like everything else in society. So I'll pass it to Farley, and then I'll come back on and speak again.
Mr. Flex, please unmute yourself. Thank you.
Oh, I thought I was. Sorry about that. Yes, just want to thank the chair and the committee for giving us this opportunity. Further to what Roderick shared, we want to include the reality of the nooses, for instance, that were found on construction sites in the GTA last year, and blackface, which seems to resurface from time to time in the news. They're both synonymous with the egregious practices of lynching and racism itself, and also represent a horrid and indisputable reflection of the past, a past that Canada still is not yet fully accounted for with respect to the reality that slavery as we knew it did exist on this side of the border and is still in denial in many people's minds, and still to a great extent does exist in the criminal justice system and the education sectors. So much so that as we identify symbols of hate, we have to give consideration to symbols that are supposed to represent positivity, such as police cars, which for many African Canadians represent a threat not too different from their ancestors experienced when members of the KKK appeared in uniform. Symbols of hate are also a matter of interpretation based on the adverse experiences of the beholder of that symbol, whether direct, indirect, or inherited. We are currently in what I refer to as the George Floyd window in North America, which, as we know, has brought to light awarenesses that we hope will move us forward with respect to race relations. Canada has the opportunity to lead in this area globally, but it will take a cohesive effort to do so, one that includes measurable strategies, programs, and outcomes. The work we do is intentionally disruptive and takes into account that all that I have mentioned. The reason we recognize the swastika as a hate symbol in the eyes of our Jewish brothers and sisters and others is because we associated with the experiences that are associated with the symbol itself. Blackface, nooses, and many other symbols are rightfully associated as hate symbols and images, but what of police symbols? Right? If we were to ask survivors of the civil rights movement what police symbols mean to them, would they not recognize the similarity in sentiments that with those of our Jewish brothers and sisters?
Right.
Thank you.
And if I could just add on, and then day to day, we either be at a hockey game seeing the bananas thrown onto the ice, pictures of monkeys on placards. Obviously, you know, these in bathrooms as you go into, you may see drawings of the hooded Ku Klux Klan members. And as Farley was mentioning, to the eye of the beholder, those people who have been oppressed or have been subjected to hate. It could be a cross, you know, to many it could be a holy cross, but to many of our Indigenous and African brothers and sisters, that cross represents colonialism and years of being subjected to cruel and undue treatment in terms of the realities of which we face. And as Farley said, but as Farley has ended off with, education from a broad spectrum, teaching our young people on how to recognize hate from an empathetic perspective, but also from our own historical perspective as Canadians is essential for us to get over this and to be well informed. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And for the witnesses, you were very efficient and effective in using your time. And now we're going to go to the question and answer component of this, in which members of parliament from all parties in the House will ask you questions. The first segment is going to be a 6-minute segment, and it begins with, for the Conservatives, John Nater. John, 6 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and again, thank you to our witnesses for joining us today and for for the insight and the commentary. I think it's been an exceptionally important message for each of us on this committee to hear, and so I do appreciate that. I want to start online first and then come into the room. I want to start with Mr. Flex and Mr. Brereton. Both of you provided some exceptionally important commentary, but I want to know a little bit more about your organization itself and what both of you do in terms of the community, the work that you undertake. Especially, you mentioned the interpretation, the understanding of symbols, of examples such as that. I was wondering if you could just elaborate a little bit more about what you do in the community to help.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Okay.
Go ahead, Rod, and I'll chime in, please.
Okay. So Urban Resolution Social Enterprise prides itself, I would say, in terms of imparting social education where the traditional school systems have not, whether it be anti-Black racism or anti-Semitism or in terms of just underrepresented groups, having a voice and empowering community to have a voice when they've often have not been seen nor heard. And we look through a lens, or we work through a lens of empowerment, giving people that voice to be able to be at the tables as opposed to be on the menus. And often we find ourselves working in very challenged communities or situations just based on the oppression and the self-fulfilling prophecies that have often accompanied hatred and oppression and how people view themselves. So we try to reverse engineer some of that narrative, but also to give a sense of a new social conditioning or an opportunity to rewrite a narrative that has often been written by somebody else who hasn't had our best interest. Farley?
Yes, and if I could just say briefly that the other aspect of what we do is we try to close when we recognize a gap, we try to close it. So we don't only work with the folks who are socioeconomically and racially marginalized, we work with the incumbent society, the dominant caste, the privileged, to ensure that they understand the historical context and the ways in which folks who are reaching out to say, what is allyship? What can I do for the community? What is it? How can I support? And we know the old adage that there are folks who are of your kind who are not of your color, and there are folks of your color who are not of your kind. So we keep an open door policy in terms of those who want to be educated, and we don't accept 1 hour and a half consultations on DEI. We encourage organizations to take a fulsome dose of what we have to offer, which usually is anywhere up to a year of training and follow-ups and subcommittee development and so forth, to ensure that the practices are normalized in institutions and organizations.
Great. Thank you very much for those commentary. I want to move into the room for a couple questions now, and it may start with Mr. Marceau, and the same question as well to Ms. Kersner-Roberts as well. Both of you mentioned the prevalence of anti-Semitism in Canada, of hatred towards Jewish people. And Mr. Marceau, especially, you talked a little bit about the society, the culture that kind of allows for that to happen. I want to touch a little bit on the BDS movement, which we see, unfortunately, often on university campuses, and whether there's something that we as parliamentarians at the federal level should be taking stronger action on the BDS movement. What we ought to be doing to counteract that, especially on university campuses, but more generally as well. If you had any thoughts on that.
Thank you, Mr. Nader. The BDS movement has a very clear goal of delegitimizing and demonizing the only Jewish state on the planet. It is an attack not on Israeli policy, but on the very right of the Jewish people to self-determination. And that is why we believe it's anti-Semitic. I'll go further. You would have seen in the last 6 to 8 weeks a flurry of diplomatic action in the Middle East, where you saw the president of Israel going to Turkey. You would have seen a summit in Egypt where the Prime Minister of Israel, along with the President of Egypt and the Crown Prince of the United Arab Emirates met in Egypt. You would have seen the Negev summit where the foreign ministers of 4 Arab countries met with the Foreign Minister of Israel. So the impact of BDS is meaningless and minuscule on Israel. Where the impact is in Canada, where the BDS movement and the anti-Israel movement is bullying, is threatening Jewish people on campus. You mentioned it. It's a very big deal. And the goal here in Canada is to create unsafe spaces where Jews are not allowed to do things as Jews. And where you would have seen, and I'll close on that, Madam Chair, for example, mundane events like a Hanukkah party being targeted by BDS activists, whereas it was just a party. So that is the climate that this movement and the anti-Israel movement is condoning and in fact flaming. Thank you for the question.
Thank you. There's 15 seconds left. Mr. Nader, if you wish to use it.
Mr. Lever, Ms. Kerner-Roberts, a couple seconds.
Yeah, I think Mr. Marceau has correctly positioned as an anti-Semitic movement, but I think one of the tools we have in the toolkit, and it's been adopted by the Parliament of Canada as part of the anti-racism strategy, it's been adopted by other provinces, and that is the International Holocaust Remembrance Alliance definition of anti-Semitism is one of those tools, whether it would be on campus or in municipal governments. It allows anti-Semitism to be identified, and when we can identify it, we can seek strategies for dealing with it. And that's something that our Special Envoy on Anti-Semitism, Erwin Kotler, is certainly working on across the country. We've seen it being implemented on campuses, in the US and Europe, in the UK, and it's something that we continue to advocate for. The IRA definition of anti-Semitism being adopted is a key part in being able to combat the anti-Semitism like BDS.
Thank you, Mr. Levitt. I will now go to the Liberal Party, and for 6 minutes, Mr. Housefather, Anthony Housefather.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair, and thank you very much to all of the witnesses that came today. Your testimony was incredibly compelling. I think it's important to note that the groups that are here today, the Jewish community has been in this country for over 260 years. The Black community has been here for hundreds of years. There's a proud legacy of contributions that all of these different communities have made to Canada. And nobody deserves to face hate in their own country. Now, there's a lot of things that I could say that Canada has a very low rate of anti-Semitism overall. If you look at Pew studies compared to other countries, the rate of anti-Semitism overall in Canada is low. And in fact, in the Angus Reid poll that was done last week, you saw that the Jewish community had the highest favorability of any religious community in Canada. But at the same time, as a Jewish Canadian, in the last federal election, I was shocked to see that every day of my campaign, new Nazi swastikas appeared on my posters. Never have I had that in my life in this country. Last May, during the conflict between Israel and Hamas, for the very first time I had constituents that asked me, was it safe for their children to play in parks wearing a kippah? Holocaust survivors that would come to me and say, should I take the mezuzah off my door so that nobody can know I'm Jewish? And every group in this country should be able to be visible and proud in Canada, and religions should not be, we should not be ashamed of religion, they should be allowed. So coming to that, I want to get to the questions that I had, which is, it's really important to understand what hate is and make sure that we're not going overboard in terms of free speech. So as you said, Daniel, it was really, really interesting to hear what you said about how many hundreds of symbols and they change all the time. I guess the question is there's a few core ones, whether it's the Confederate flag, whether it's the Nazi swastika, and I'll be very careful to say the Nazi swastika, and some others. I'd like to just hear from the witnesses. Do you believe that based on 318 and 319 of the Criminal Code, that would already be covered, or would the explicit mention of saying that, for example, the use of the Confederate flag or the Nazi swastika, subject to the religious exceptions and other exceptions we made, would it be a useful addition to the criminal code as was proposed in my colleague Mr. Julian's bill? And maybe you can just go one after the other. Mr. Marceau?
Is it already covered? I believe so. Would it be useful to be more precise? I believe so.
Fantastic answer. Very fast.
I'd like to reiterate the points that were just made. I believe it would be effective. However, due to the remixing nature of culture right now, even if we ban the swastika, we're going to see the swastika appearing in new forms and shrouded in different ways. So it's important that we basically keep on it in addition to criminalizing.
Yeah, I believe that it is already illegal. It's a form of, it's a way of promoting hate or advocating genocide. However, as someone that's working on the front lines with law enforcement every day on individual hate crimes that take place, I will tell you that police are very reluctant to consider it a hate crime. Just seeing this symbol, they're very reluctant to investigate. They're reluctant to lay charges. They don't know whether it will stand up in court, and for that reason, I do believe it would be an advancement to make the law more explicit, so that there was less ambiguity from the eyes of law enforcement.
Thank you. And I just want to also say, in terms of what Mr. Farber said about being, and I was so moved by being a descendant of a Holocaust survivor and not having any family on his father's side, you know, it reminds me that this week and tonight is the beginning of Yom HaShoah, which is a day that we remember all of the 6 million Jews who were victims in the Holocaust, who were murdered by the Nazis, and how appropriate it is that we're having this discussion in the Canadian Parliament on that very anniversary of that date. And also on the week that B'nai Bris audit this week showed that even though Jews make up about 1.25% of the Canadian population, Jews are the victims of 61% of religious hate crimes in Canada. There's something weird and awesomely bad about that. Mr. Pennant, I want to ask a question about social media. When it comes to social media, we see wherever it goes, whether it was right before the insurrection last year, QAnon, whether it's George Soros, whatever seems to be happening, and Jews are always sort of at the center of the narrative. And we see that with the Russians right now, disinformation campaign about Ukraine. Can you explain to me historically, why is it that all of these groups, for some reason, seem to want to go after Jews as part of their disinformation campaigns?
In a nutshell, it's a very complicated question, but I'll point to the historical document, the Protocols of the Elders of Zion. Which emerged from a Russian forgery. Basically, people responded to it because it provided a very convenient narrative for a lot of the growing pains of modernity. Those conspiracy theories and the general framework that the protocols have promoted continue to exist, whether people realize it or not. So you alluded to George Soros, QAnon. People may not realize when they say globalists that they actually mean a very old anti-Semitic narrative, but that is what they are saying.
Thank you so much. And I just share, I'm going to close my time to share Mr. Levitt's view about IRA. Mr. Levitt, can you talk about some of the organizations in Canada, other than the Government of Canada, Government of Ontario, Government of Quebec, that have all adopted IRA, who should be adopting IRA?
You have 21 seconds, Michael.
That's more than the 15 seconds I got the last time, so I'll consider myself fortunate. Now I have 15. Yeah, we already addressed the issue of campus, and I think campus has been a hotbed of anti-Semitism. We've got Jewish students that have to become campus warriors defending their right to wear a kippah or to have a table, supporting Israel, to do any of these things. And that's out of control. So we know that the IRA definition, we've seen IRA adopted in university institutions across the US, across the UK. And again, it's a tool. It's something to be able to help bring clarity. The number of cases we get at Friends of Simon Wiesenthal Center from parents and students coming in who have faced discrimination, anti-Semitism, racism on campus, and the answer from administration is, well, we're not really sure if it's anti-Semitism or not. There's a definition, there's a way to deal with this, and we need to see that being adopted much more widely across the country.
Thank you, Mr. Levitt. I now go to the Bloc Québécois, Mr. Champoux.
Mr. Champoux, for 6 minutes.
Oui, je suis là, Madame la Présidente.
Yes, here I am, Madam Chair. Thank you very much. I will use my 6 minutes the same way that Mr. Levitt used the 15 seconds or the 20 seconds.
Je vous avoue que je trouve
I'll admit that I found the discussion that we're having today so interesting. As Anthony Housefather said a few moments ago, it could not be more timely. Also, I admit I have a bit of difficulty to develop a specific opinion on this matter. On the one hand, myself, I am deeply shocked when I see hate symbols, and I would draw a parallel with what Anthony was mentioning during the electoral campaign last fall, when I saw on his Twitter account photos be posted, photos of extremely hateful images, and we communicated about that at that time. Everyone was scandalized by that. But at the same time, there's also this fine line of the sacrosanct liberty of expression. This is what makes it hard for me to develop my opinion, and that is part of our discussion today. And I will speak frankly and optimistically. I always hope that we can use education and discussion and conversation to reach objectives. And sometimes there are lost causes, and we all know that. But Mr. Marceau, we've already chatted together. And I think you understand my awareness and my position. How do we draw the line between what is a hate symbol and what is not? First of all, Mr. Champoux, thank you for your question. I am a fervent defender of freedom of expression. I defend that position because in order to have a healthy democracy, one of the most important ingredients is freedom of expression. I believe that in the Quebec and Canadian public, legal and judicial environment, we have reached a very reasonable position where, yes, freedom of expression exists. It's protected in the Quebec Charter and the Canadian Charter, but there are also limits that can be placed upon that freedom. Insofar as it is protected in a reasonable way in a free and democratic society. So this is a foundational principle that needs to guide us in this discussion. We are not in the United States where the freedom of expression practically has no limits. That's not true that it has absolutely no limits, but they have a different legal culture than we do in Quebec or in Canada. And that's also true for Europe. There are also countries in Europe that are just as democratic as we are, and they can also have limits on their freedoms and on their rights. There are certain symbols that are very clearly hateful. Ms. Kisner-Roberts mentioned this symbol earlier. The most striking symbol is the Nazi swastika. There's absolutely no reason to brandish such a symbol unless it's for educational purposes or for art, for example, in an art gallery or in a film, or something along those lines. But when one displays the SS symbol, the Nazi swastika, or other symbols like them, it's not a gray area. It's black or white. And I think in this discussion that we need to have is that it's less concrete because it's fluid and meanings can change, but there are, nevertheless, certain symbols whose meaning cannot be disputed. I certainly agree with what you're saying. But I'm hearing from certain groups saying that this symbol affects us particularly, and we also think this symbol should be banned. And I think we could have an eternal debate on what is considered as hateful and what is not. We could discuss this for all of time. I'll take this example. Groups that tend to be more influenceable on certain ideas. And earlier I was discussing this with a colleague. Mr. Sky, I'll call him, a person who is radicalized, becomes anti-Semitic, and denies the Holocaust. And this person comes to this protest against COVID measures. And this individual is going to meet and rub shoulders with other people who are probably very influenceable and amenable to be led to believe certain of his ideas. What do you think about these types of individuals acting victimized by freedom of expression? Don't you think that if we ban these symbols, we would be fueling their arguments, even though we're trying to do quite the opposite? Answer. If doing nothing worked, we would know. It is not the case. In our view, there has been enough inaction already in Canada, and what it has led to is a rise. One of the elements that we've seen is a rise in hate in Canada. That's not all there is to it, but that is one reality. Banning hate symbols is one of the things that needs to be done, among others. I have an exhaustive list, Madam Chair. It's a strategy against online hate, attorney generals and judges being better trained, hate crimes units across the country, and better education. And I could tell you about this for much longer, Mr. Champoux. Mr. Champoux says, I don't have the 15 seconds Mr. Levitt had, unfortunately. Thank you.
Oh, you had a little more than that too. Now we're going to go to Peter Julian for the NDP. Mr. Julian, 6 minutes, please.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. Thanks to all our witnesses. This is some of the most important testimony that we've heard in this Parliament, and we deeply appreciate you coming forward today to speak. I'm the sponsor of Bill C-229, banning symbols of hate act, and there's been some discussion around the legality or not of putting forward a Nazi hooked cross, a Nazi flag, a Confederate flag, KKK symbols. The genesis of the bill, in reaction to the rise in hate that we are seeing, is also the fact that a block from my constituency office, a store was openly selling Nazi paraphernalia, openly selling Nazi flags, Nazi emblems. And when the City of New Westminster looked at how it could shut down this open sale and display of this appalling symbol of genocidal hate, the city was told there are no laws against it. Other communities in Canada, Summerlin, British Columbia, the mayor was forced to go into a store selling Nazi paraphernalia, this appalling symbol of genocidal hate. The mayor bought the entire stock and burned it, and then the store owner went out and bought more. So there is obviously, in my mind, a vacuum that needs to be filled. We have these appalling symbols that are openly displayed, even on Parliament Hill, a few steps away from the Hall of Honor, where 40,000 Canadians are commemorated having given their lives fighting Nazism, including my Uncle Patrick. This cannot continue, I believe. So my question is to Mr. Farbert, to Mr. Marceau, to Ms. Kirstner-Roberts, to Mr. Sharma, and Mr. Brereton. Do you believe that it is time now for Canada to act and follow the lead of other countries where there's a best practice banning these symbols of genocidal hate, of violent racism, of white supremacy, so that we very clearly say that this is illegal in this country, as it is in other countries? And I'll start with Mr. Farber.
Thank you very much, and let me be very clear. It is absolutely necessary to find laws in which to do this. There was a question asked by the by the Bloc Québécois member in relation to trying to understand what is hate. Well, this has already been defined by the Supreme Court of Canada in the last Whatcott hearing in which our anti-hate laws were upheld. The justices actually found 7 hallmarks of hate. I think Canada has done the best possible job in actually defining hatred, and I would urge the clerk of the committee maybe to pass that decision on to the members so that they have a clear understanding of this. This isn't difficult. The emblem of the Nazi hooked cross brings death and pain to those who suffered under it. There is no ifs, ands, or buts about it. We have to find ways to do it properly. But I think, as everybody here said, Mr. Marceau and Mr. Levitt and others, this is another tool in our arsenal. This is the way we move forward. I would urge members to give this strong, strong consideration.
Mr. Marceau.
Mr. Julian, your question was, is it time for Canada to ban?
Excuse me, before Mr. Marceau answers, I will not take your time, Richard. I will give it to you again. But we have bells ringing. Means we have votes. I would like to get unanimous consent from the committee to go to the end of Mr. Julian's round, so that they can leave and go to vote. So I go ahead, Richard.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So, Mr. Julian, your question, is it time for Canada to ban hate symbols? And my answer is a clear yes.
Ms. Kersner-Roberts.
Julian, was your question, is it time to ban hate symbols, or is your question, is it time to ban Nazi relics and Holocaust relics?
Well, my bill talks about Nazi emblems, Confederate flag, and Confederate emblems, and KKK emblems. Is it time to adopt that kind of legislation?
I have to agree with my colleagues that it is time, that it would be a very useful advancement. For us, it would be one more tool. Yeah.
May I ask Mr. Levitt if you have anything to add? 15 seconds, sir.
15 seconds. Well, I
will give you I'll give you the extra minute that I took to ask for unanimous consent.
One of the things my colleague, Ms. Kersner-Roberts, talked about in her remarks was what we're seeing happening in schools to our kids, where all of a sudden these symbols are appearing in classrooms. We had situations in Toronto where there's been Sieg Heil salutes, Hitler salutes. A lot of it's coming off, and our colleague here from the Neuberger Centre has talked about the internet. We're seeing these things being pervasive. So if this can help bring a close and reduce the amount of this hate online and in our society, yes.
Thank you. Mr. Sharma. Mr. Sharma.
Sharma, yes. Yes, Peter. Okay, Mr. Sharma. Please unmute, Mr. Sharma. Please unmute.
Okay, Madam Chairman and Mr. Julian, thank you. Banning the signs of hate is not going to resolve the problem. We need to address the groups that are promoting the hate. We need to address the medium that's allowing them to promote the hate. We need to create laws that will ban or restrict hate in any form of media. And we have the power. When an organization is created, it has to be incorporated. It must be investigated to the depth to see what its objectives are. And if it's found to be promoting hate, the law is there already in the land to address that. So I think we recognize the problem, but maybe we are addressing it from the wrong end. And when we do this, innocent people get hurt. We need to address these organizations that are promoting hate and put them to the law and let the letter of the law address them and put them under control immediately. If we do anything other than ban a sign or stop selling a sign, we are not achieving anything. A next door store would open. It's like trying to ban marijuana. Today we have made it legal. We tried so long to ban it, and it's now legal. We need to stop the users of marijuana, and we need to stop the promoters of hate. We need to address them at the point. Thank you.
I'd like you to wrap up, because votes are something that we must attend, and I'm just going to give the last word to Mr. Burton.
Yes, so in terms of the question, is it time for Canada to ban hate symbols? And my answer is yes. Fear fuels hate, and it's time to now educate and give the reality in terms of where these fears are strumming from, and to set an example for the world that Canada can take this step of banning hate, but also educating.
Thank you very much. I want to thank the witnesses for waiting such a long time to begin the meeting. You had a lot of patience, and I want to thank you for your very excellent presentations and your clear and concise answers. I'm afraid we're going to have to leave to vote now, and so I want to thank you again for coming, and this meeting is now adjourned.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
you.